when someone shows contempt for us, there should be a sanction. We should have a power to act further. And I believe today's debate is not really about the end of the discussion about whether Dominic Cummings should or shouldn't have come in front of the DCIS Select Committee. It is about how we take this forward and how we formalise the powers of the House and make sure that we're not in this position again in the future.
Tommy Sheppard.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise on behalf of the SNP to support the resolution and to urge the House to vote for it. But sadly, I have to say, without any great hope or expectation that doing so will have a great deal of effect. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Speaker cautioned us at the beginning of this discussion to try and restrict our comments to the narrow business under consideration. I had wanted to put this question in the wider context of the debate on Brexit and to consider the wider political considerations, but I won't do that, and I have taken the Speaker's advice, and in my imagination I have applied a blue pen to much of what I was going to say. But I do think it's appropriate for us to note why it was that the DCMS Select Committee wanted to hear from Mr Cummings in the first place. And that is because many of the concerns that were expressed about the Vote Leave campaign exemplified some of the concerns about the debate on fake news that they were having an inquiry into. And I don't want to, as I say, I shan't go into any great detail about this, but I think as a matter of record, we have to say that the Vote Leave campaign does stand accused of engaging in lies and propaganda and willful distortion of the facts. It is a fact that it has been found guilty by the Information Commissioner of breaking the regulations on the gathering of personal data, and it is a fact that it broke the law and has been fined by the Electoral Commission for its expenses. Now, it seems to me that it would be legitimate for Mr Cummings to engage with the committee to talk about those things, and it seems to me also that his refusal to do so and to come before the committee, and that being the reason why this motion is here today, does indicate to me that maybe he has something to hide, or that he is not able to mount a defence of the accusations that have been put there. And that seems to me something that should concern this House. Others have said that, and I think it's true, that we need to be concerned, what does admonishment actually mean? What sort of sanction or leverage is this really at the end of the day? I fear it is not a very great one, and I do think this instance and others should lead us into reflection about whether or not our procedures are adequate for House of Commons inquiries into matters of public concern, and whether we need additional powers to be able to compel people to give evidence when it is in the public interest to do so, as indeed many other countries have. I make no suggestion as to how that might happen, but I simply want to put on the table that it should happen. Finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, I do think we are entitled, without going into the detailed political debate, but we are entitled to form opinions and to perhaps draw conclusions as to the intentions and attitude of Mr Cummings from what we have heard described before us in the motion. Now, and I think many other colleagues will have watched the recent BBC drama, the Brexit, the Uncivil War, which, to my mind, has a very generous and sympathetic portrayal of Dominic Cummings. It suggests that he is some sort of tortured genius. I'll take it in a moment. It suggests he is some sort of tortured genius, a radical, a free thinker, an iconoclast, someone who wants to engage in the noblest notions of sovereignty and democracy, and who wouldn't debase himself for a moment with gutter politics. But I'm not sure that's entirely the case. And before I suggest an alternative, I will happily take an intervention.
Does he not understand? I think the direction that Mr Speaker gave at the beginning of this debate was for a very important reason, that this is a serious discussion, an admonishment of somebody for a failure to appear before a committee. And it should be about the facts of that decision to not appear or otherwise. And it should not...
Order. I also know what was said, and I will be the judge of whether it's stretching beyond or remaining within the advice that Mr Speaker gave. I can assure you I'm carefully listening. At the moment we've not tread outside. I think we are coming towards the end of the speech anyhow, and we all know that there are limits which we shouldn't go beyond. I think to mention the person in passing is one thing. What I don't want to do is to get into an argument about the best or the weakness of what the examples are. It's purely about the privilege, I agree, but we certainly haven't stepped outside. But I do thank Tommy Sheppard.
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I have been keeping your eye very carefully to try and make sure I don't stray beyond the bounds of the limitations that were set. So I will conclude by simply saying that I have drawn my own opinions from what has happened in this case as to the character of Mr Cummings, and perhaps the truth is rather more mundane. Perhaps he is just a posh boy after all, from a privileged background, who has a sense of entitlement that means he doesn't see himself as having to account to his peers for his actions. And therefore, I rather fear that the honourable gentleman from Lichfield is correct, actually. I rather fear that if we do pass this as we should, that at his next dinner party it will be worn as a badge of honour, and he will continue the contempt of this House, because there are people of his class who regard democratic institutions like this in precisely that way.
Sir Johnson.
Mr Deputy Speaker, along with many colleagues here, I think the Select Committee system is a good one, and it can only